I didn't leave my graduation party because I was angry, at least not at first. I left because I suddenly understood something I had spent 23 years trying not to see. The backyard was full of people. My parents had rented tables, hired a caterer, and invited nearly everyone they knew. From a distance, it looked like a celebration of my graduation. Up close, it felt different. My younger sister, Emma, moved easily through the crowd. People loved her. So did my parents. That wasn't new. The comparisons had started when we were children. Emma was charming. I was responsible. Emma was talented. I was dependable. Every compliment I received somehow became a reason to praise her instead. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that graduating at the top of my class mattered more than approval. I told myself a lot of things. Then my father stood to make a toast. Conversations faded. Glasses lifted. Everyone turned toward him. For a moment, I actually felt proud. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the first time. He smiled, then he looked directly at Emma. I wish it was you holding that diploma. A few people laughed nervously. I remember hearing silverware stop moving. My father's smile never changed. You're the only child who has ever truly made me proud. My mother nodded beside him, not surprised, not embarrassed, just agreeing. The silence afterward lasted only a second, but it felt longer. Someone cleared their throat. A cousin looked down at her plate. My academic advisor, seated near the back, stared at my father with visible confusion. Meanwhile, my parents acted as though nothing unusual had happened, as though everyone had heard the same speech differently. I waited for a correction, a joke, anything. Nothing came, so I stood up, not dramatically, not loudly. I walked through the gate and left. Nobody stopped me, at least not then. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour before parking near the river outside town, my phone filled with messages. Most were from friends asking if I was okay. A few relatives apologized for what had happened. Neither of my parents called. That hurt more than the speech itself. By midnight, I had checked into a small hotel. I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I just couldn't face another conversation where I pretended everything was normal. The next morning, my phone rang. It was Dr. Reynolds, the department chair from my university. I almost ignored the call. Instead, I answered. He spoke carefully. I was at the party. I closed my eyes. I know. There was a pause, then he said something I never forgot. What happened yesterday wasn't a reflection of your accomplishments. His voice remained calm, but it reflected very clearly on someone else. For several minutes, we talked. Not about my parents, not about family, about my work, my research, the graduate fellowship I had earned, the future. Before ending the call, he invited me to attend a university recognition luncheon later that week. I nearly declined. Eventually, I agreed. I thought it would be a small event. I was wrong. The luncheon included faculty members, scholarship sponsors, local business leaders, and several university trustees, people whose opinions carried real weight, people who had spent years evaluating achievement professionally. When my name was called, I walked to the front expecting a certificate and a handshake. Instead, Dr. Reynolds stepped to the microphone. He spoke about persistence, about academic excellence, about overcoming obstacles without seeking attention. Then he listed accomplishments I had almost forgotten myself: research awards, leadership projects, volunteer work, honors. The room applauded, not politely, genuinely. For the first time in my life, recognition wasn't being redirected to someone else. It wasn't being shared. It wasn't being minimized. It simply existed. Afterwards, several attendees approached me. One offered a networking opportunity. Another discussed a graduate program. A scholarship sponsor introduced me to an executive from a company I admired. Doors started opening, not because anyone felt sorry for me, it's because they respected my work. Weeks later, I learned something unexpected. Word about the graduation party had spread not dramatically, not online, just quietly. People talked. The same guests who had witnessed the toast shared what they saw. My parents discovered that many of those conversations were not flattering. The issue wasn't favoritism, it was the public humiliation. People couldn't understand why they would treat their own child that way. For perhaps the first time, my parents encountered a reality they couldn't control. Their version of events wasn't the only one that existed. Months passed. I accepted a position in another city. The distance helped. Calls became less frequent. Visits became rare. Life moved forward. Then one evening my mother called. Her voice sounded different. Older somehow. We miss you. I believed her, but that wasn't the same thing as understanding. A few minutes later, she said something I had waited years to hear. We may have made mistakes. May have not exactly accountability, but more than I expected. I didn't argue. I didn't list every memory. I didn't explain the damage. There was no point. Some wounds become part of a family story that nobody fully agrees on. Before hanging up, she asked whether I would come home for the holidays. I told her I wasn't sure, and honestly, I wasn't. After the call ended, I sat quietly in my apartment. Outside, city lights reflected against the windows. For years, I had believed my parents were the judges of my worth. Everything I achieved was really an attempt to convince them I deserved their approval. The graduation party had destroyed that illusion, painfully, publicly, completely. What surprised me wasn't that they had rejected me. It was discovering that their rejection no longer carried the authority I once gave it. Other people had seen my value long before I did. Professors, friends, mentors, colleagues, people with nothing to gain from pretending. The toast that was supposed to diminish me ended up revealing something else entirely. Not who I was, who they were, and once that became impossible to ignore, the control they held over my life began to disappear quietly, without revenge, without celebration. Just one uncomfortable truth replacing another. For the first time, that was enough.